Good morning. Basa na tayo ng ating libro. Kapwa ka Filipino, magbasa na tayo ng ating history. History of the Filipino People by Agoncillo and Guerrero. Today is 23 February 2023. History of the Filipino People, Part 5, The Warriors. Topic number 22, The Japanese Occupation. Nandito tayo sa paragraph The Occupation of Manila. Basa. The occupation of Manila, the Japanese preparation for the war, particularly the attack on the Philippines, was planned carefully. Even before their planes could take off to attack targets in the Philippines, 3 task forces were already on their way to the Philippines. 2 were to land in the northern Luzon and 1 in Bataan Island. At dawn of December 8, the Japanese landed at Bataan without any opposition. 2 days later, enemy landings were made at Apare and Pandan, near Vigan. In the south, the Japanese coming from Palau Island landed at Legazpi on the same day. Similar landings were made in Davao and Jolo on December 20. There was little opposition to these landings, for there was not sufficient men to meet the enemy. Moreover, the Philippine defenses were poor and only a few planes were on hand to battle the enemy. Rumors which circulated in Manila immediately before the war were to the effect that powerful American bombers, particularly the B-24s, had arrived and that the Japanese bombers and fighter planes would be blasted out of the blue skies if ever they attempted to fly over Manila. All these rumors of American strength in the Philippines, it turned out, were really rumors calculated to bolster the morale of the Filipinos. The few American planes in Clark Field and Nichols Field were destroyed in the first days of the Japanese air raids. Consequently, when the enemy forces landed north and south of Luzon, no effective defense could prevent the Japanese from knifing their way through Yosafi territory. Meanwhile, Japanese major landings were made on December 22. The enemy stormed ashore at Lingayen, and the Americans, though previously warned of the invasion, failed to prevent the landing. From Lingayen, the Japanese moved swiftly to Damortis and Rosario and on to Central Luzon. At almost the same time, landings were effected at 3 points along Lamon Bay, at Mauban, Atimunan, and Siain, to separate forces were converging on Manila. The northern force coming from Lingayen and the southern force coming from Lamon Bay. Saan yung Lamon Bay? Alam niyo guys, sa Pilipinas, hindi ko talaga kabisado pa lahat ng lugar. Siyempre, hindi natin nalilibot yan. Despite heroic defense, whose purpose was to give the Yosafi enough time to retreat to Bataan, the Japanese armies marched toward Manila with but slight opposition on January 2, 1942. The advanced elements of the Japanese invasion forces entered Manila from the north and the south. Manila became an occupied city. Quezon and Corregidor. Manuel L. Quezon, President of the Commonwealth, was a very sick man when the war broke out. The sufferings of the people increased his worries, which to a large extent contributed to his physical breakdown. Thousands were killed as a result of indiscriminate bombings of the enemy, and thousands more were hospitalized for wounds received from enemy bombs and bullets. It was obvious to General MacArthur that the only way to save his army was to retreat to the Bataan Peninsula, where he planned to hold back the Japanese. He issued orders to the field commanders to save the bulk of the army by taking their military units to Bataan. The retreat was carried out masterfully without any sign of demoralization in the ranks. On December 24, 1941, MacArthur informed Quezon that he and some of his officials, as well as the members of his family, were to leave for Corregidor at 2 o'clock that afternoon. Quezon immediately called the last meeting of his cabinet and informed him of the decision to hold up in Corregidor. Those chosen to accompany him to the island fortress were Secretary of Justice Jose Abad Santos, Vice President Sergio Osmeña, General Basilio Valdez, and Colonel Manuel Nieto. Jose P. Laurel, then acting Chief Justice, wanted to go with Quezon, but the latter restrained him. "No, Laurel," the president said. "Someone will have to meet the Japanese. The people must be given the necessary protection. Times will be hard. A big man is needed for the job. You must stay." Laurel, however, pointed out that the Japanese would make demands, some of them impossible. "How far?" he asked. "Can I go in cooperating with them?" The question was legitimate, and Quezon had General MacArthur called to answer the question. "You can do anything," said MacArthur, "but take the oath of allegiance to the Japanese. If anyone does that, I will shoot him when I return." Then under Laurel was sworn in as Secretary of Justice to take the place of Abad Santos. Quezon turned to the high officials of the Commonwealth and gave them his last instructions. "Do the best you can. Make what bargains you have to with those people, the Japanese. Try to keep the Philippines together in one piece. Try to protect the people from Japan's brutality and avarice. You have some tough decisions to make, but the job must be done. Do it for the future of the Philippines." The Japanese bombers were still hitting the port area in Manila at the time Quezon and his party were scheduled to leave. At 3 o'clock, Quezon party headed for the Mayon, which took them to Corregidor. Here on December 30, Quezon took his oath of office as President of the Commonwealth, marking the end of his first term and the beginning of his second term. The fall of Bataan and Corregidor. MacArthur's retreat to Bataan was a brilliant maneuver, for in the process he outwitted General Masaharu Homa, the Japanese commander-in-chief, who failed in his attempt to encircle the Yusafi as he had contemplated. Maneuvering in a limited territory, MacArthur succeeded in keeping his army intact and well coordinated. Several times the Japanese launched their offensives against Bataan, only to be repulsed with heavy losses. It was the strategy of the Japanese Imperial Command to subjugate the Philippines within a short period of time in order to proceed immediately to the conquest of other parts of Asia. The heroic defense of the Filipino-American troops on Bataan irritated the Japanese. Again and again, Japanese land and sea forces, aided by bombers, returned to the attack, but the Bataan lines held out heroically. Japanese leaflets asking the Filipino soldiers to surrender and to desert their American comrades in arms were dropped on Bataan to demoralize the Yusafi, but the courageous Filipino soldiers ignored the Japanese propaganda. As months dragged on, aid from the United States seemed impossible. The Japanese Navy commanded the sea lanes of the Pacific. Moreover, the United States and Great Britain had already agreed on the Europe First policy. The effect on the Bataan defenders was partial demoralization, for without arms, ammunition, and food, the Yusafi was bound to disintegrate under the pressure of continued enemy attacks. By mid-March 1942, rations became scarce. Lack of food led to malnutrition, diarrhea, malaria, and vitaminosis, or lack of vitamins in the body, led to a casualty bigger than that inflicted by enemy bullets. Medicines was scarce too, and the men suffering from the rigors of war began to lose hope. General MacArthur, on orders of President Roosevelt, left Corregidor for Australia on March 11, 1942. He was succeeded as commander of the USAF by General Jonathan Wainwright. President Quezon had earlier left for Australia. They were picked up on the night of February 18 by the submarine Swordfish. Under the circumstances, the Bataan defenders had no other alternative than to surrender. On April 9, General Edward P. King, commander of the forces on Bataan, surrendered. Some 78,000 of General King's forces were included in the surrender negotiations. Around 2,000 escaped to Corregidor and to the surrounding provinces. Wainwright, as USAF commander-in-chief, was in Corregidor. King surrender and Bataan therefore was an individual surrender and not the surrender of the entire USAF force. Thus ended the Battle of Bataan, which resounded throughout the world. The surrendered Filipino-American troops were forced at gunpoint to march from Bataan to San Fernando, Pampanga, under the hot tropical sun. Those who could not march because, ito yung naalala ko to yung date, March o Bataan. May naalala ko nito eh. The surrendered Filipino-American troops, nabasa ko lang din yun. The surrendered Filipino-American troops were forced at gunpoint to march from Bataan to San Fernando, Pampanga, under the hot tropical sun. Those who could not march because of physical weakness were shot down or bayoneted. So inhuman was the forced march that the event has called the Death March. Ito na nga yun. Death March. In Capas, the prisoners were huddled together like animals hungry and sick. Meanwhile, the Japanese stepped up their offensive against Corregidor from Bataan, now under the Japanese from the sea, and from Cavite, the island fortress was subjected to intense fire. There was no rest for the defenders. The enemy bombings were continuous day and night. In Manila, in the stillness of the night, the people could hear the successive bombings and artillery fire directed against Corregidor. Against the clear sky, the people of the city could see orange flashes that heralded the booms of the enemy artillery pounding relentlessly at the historic island. In the morning of May 6, General Wainwright addressed a message to General Homa through the Voice of Freedom, offering to surrender. In the afternoon, he met General Homa at the conference table. The barrel-chested Homa demanded the surrender of the entire USAF forces in the Philippines. Wainwright hid his intention being to surrender only the men directly under him, but Homa insisted on the surrender of all and stood up to leave. Wainwright had no other alternative than to give in to the enemy's demand. The fall of the Philippines, at least officially, was now complete. Bukas na itong reorganization of the government. Bye everyone. God bless.